begun. I danced in the moon and the stars in the sun. I came down from heaven and I danced on the earth. Bethlehem, I had my birth. Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you on wherever you may be, and I'll lead you on to the dance, said he. Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you on wherever you may be, and I'll lead you on to the dance, said he. Welcome all and good morning to New Hope Presbyterian Church's Easter sunrise service. Every Easter we should just get to the point of why we are all here, which is to say, Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. Let us say it together, that Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. And like that hymn we opened instructed us to do, dance wherever you may be. Given our circumstances, there are no more appropriate and fitting words this morning. That might mean you're rejoicing right now over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee at your home in your favorite easy chair. It might mean you're waking up to this video and you're in your pajamas watching it. That is awesome. Wherever you are now, let us look to the sky, look to this light returning into the world. All of creation is joining with us this morning. The chorus is singing with or without us. Heaven and nature sing, and so we do the same. So let's go ahead and hear then that old story of that first Easter morning written so long ago. We will start and hear John's account, chapter 20. And that is verses 1 through 18. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she went and she ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and they went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look into it and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciple returned, both of them, to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she bent over and looked into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned and she saw it was him, and in Hebrew she said, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There's something ever so exciting about the way John tells the story. And maybe that's because it starts with all this running and a frenzy of excitement and movement. Mary goes to the tomb at daybreak. We're not told why she goes. Maybe to bring spices in the other Gospels. Maybe it's just to have a little piece of closure. But she goes and the tomb is empty. So she runs to Simon Peter and to this other anonymous disciple. Some think it's John. And then they in turn run as fast as their legs can carry them to investigate. Peter needs a little breather, so he's outran by this other anonymous disciple. And this anonymous disciple gets there first, but he doesn't go in. Peter gets there second and does go in, and that prompts this other disciple to finally go in. And what does it say? They look and they see the wrappings, and he, the anonymous disciple, saw and believed. But believed what exactly? That Jesus has returned from the dead? That's a long shot at this point. I think more so believed what Mary had said is true. Jesus' body was indeed missing. And what does one do with that news? Peter and John go home, perhaps to grieve one final last indignation for their friend. Maybe they're just over the whole thing. Do they go home to formulate a plan? We don't really know of what comes next. But at any rate, the empty tomb as of yet is a tragedy. It's not a triumph. But at some point in all this running, Mary also arrives back at the tomb and she's weeping. She does not go home because maybe that body is closure for her and she's not expecting anything else. It's why she came in the first place. For all of those reasons, we still visit graves. For Mary, even the angel's testimony does not console. They speak to Mary, but unlike in the other Gospels, in John it's just a question. Why are you weeping? And you wonder if she thought, seriously? He's gone. They've taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they've laid him. She gives a similar response to this mysterious gardener. Now we know this gardener's Jesus, but Mary doesn't. Is it her grief that prevents it? Is it the darkness? Does Jesus just look different than the last memory she had of him when he was hanging on a cross? And here's what's so unique in John's account. The only thing that rips Mary from her grief, the only thing that reveals Jesus' presence to her, maybe even calls her back to herself, is Jesus calls her by name, Mary. And it's like all those blinders of the previous 3 days, they fall to the ground. She gets it instantly. She says, Rabboni, teacher, the teacher. And that's what the voice of God does. That's what the power of new life does. Christ's resurrection, it calls us by name, saying you are redeemed. Creation is redeemed. You are good enough. You are not abandoned. We start seeing new life and God's energy everywhere. Jesus, in some ways, makes it the disciples and Mary's and our resurrection too. All of a sudden, what we thought as a gardener looks a lot like Jesus. And here, all of a sudden, what looks like a river becomes a sanctuary. And all of a sudden, grief and whatever we carry is transformed into something that creates us in a way that we never thought possible. Lo and behold, God was right behind us the entire time. Mary was certainly not looking for a miracle. Only when Jesus spoke her name did she believe. Only when she remembers that it's the same voice who said earlier in John's Gospel that a good shepherd calls his sheep by name, doesn't lose even one. We are those witnesses today that Jesus calls by name to carry on the news of Mary's first Easter morning proclamation. The first sermon in all of Christianity. It comes from Mary, and all it says is, I have seen the Lord. I have seen the Lord, the places that seem to hold life captive. And maybe that's now a paper stack desk at your house from where you're working from, Or maybe that place now is a nursing home or a hospital where loved ones can no longer visit their sick. In all these places, the risen Lord appears right when the darkness seems to have the end of the story. But God gives us a new ending we never saw coming. Christ has risen. Christ is on the loose. The Spirit is moving into the world, and especially for all those in these times who are desperate to simply hear some good Easter news this morning. Yes, we are those witnesses called by name. And like Mary, what makes us reliable is not our status, it's not our social standing, it's not our eloquence or education or our knowledge of theology or our shining personalities. What makes us reliable is to tell the story is the same thing that made Mary a reliable witness. We have seen and know the power of resurrection of God in our own lives. We know that this continues in countless ways. We love to tell the story of how God has called us to follow. So how is Jesus calling your name today? In your joy or in your grief, in the complexity of all who we are, the places that seem as cold and as lifeless as a tombstone, God is calling your name to follow. So how will you answer? Friends, now I'm just going to let the camera play. I'm going to watch with you as the light comes in to remove the darkness. Listen to this world coming alive. That Christ is risen. He's risen indeed. Amen.